Oh, why do they always send these ghetto people to my gate? Go back where you came from. Patricia Reynolds' disgusted voice echoed across gate C-24 at Denver International Airport. The blonde gate agent stood behind her United Airlines counter, her face contorted with open contempt. Jonathan Hayes, a well-dressed black man, had approached with his boarding pass and passport. Patricia immediately grabbed his documents and threw his passport directly into the trash bin. She then pulled out hand sanitizer, squirted it dramatically on her hands, and made exaggerated gagging motions as if his presence made her physically sick. "Don't breathe on me," she hissed loudly enough for dozens of passengers to hear. "Security!" she yelled theatrically. "Remove this vagrant from my gate immediately!" The entire waiting area fell silent as passengers stared in shock. Jonathan remained perfectly calm as his passport sat buried in garbage. Have you ever witnessed pure hatred disguised as authority? What happens next will restore your faith in justice. Earlier that morning in his downtown Denver hotel room, Jonathan Hayes had methodically prepared for what he expected to be a routine business trip. The crisp white sheets of the Marriott reflected the early sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows as he carefully folded his pressed shirts into his garment bag. His leather briefcase sat open on the mahogany desk, revealing neatly organized official documents. A glimpse of a federal identification badge caught the light before he tucked it securely into his wallet alongside his driver's license and platinum credit cards. The smell of fresh coffee from the in-room machine mixed with the faint scent of his cologne as Jonathan reviewed paperwork on his laptop. The screen displayed what appeared to be airline passenger manifests and detailed facility compliance reports with government letterhead. His phone buzzed against the glass desktop. "Hayes speaking," he answered in his characteristic professional tone. "Jonathan, it's Sarah from the office," came his assistant's familiar voice. "Confirming your inspection schedule, you're conducting the surprise compliance review at DIA tonight?" Jonathan adjusted his silk tie while cradling the phone against his shoulder. "Correct. Unannounced operational security assessment. I'll be observing passenger processing procedures and staff interactions with particular attention to civil rights compliance." "Perfect. Your federal credentials are updated in the system. I've prepared the incident report templates you requested, plus the new discrimination documentation forms." Through the hotel window, Jonathan could see Denver's skyline stretching toward the Rocky Mountains. His expensive Swiss watch, a promotion gift celebrating his advancement to senior safety inspector with the Federal Aviation Administration, glinted as he reached for his coffee mug. "Excellent, Sarah. These routine assessments usually proceed without incident. Most airline personnel maintain professional standards when they know federal oversight is possible." "Of course. Safe travels, and remember the new protocol? Document everything, especially any differential treatment patterns," Jonathan finished with a slight smile. 8 years of doing this, Sarah. I know the drill better than anyone." After ending the call, Jonathan closed his laptop and straightened his charcoal gray suit jacket. As one of the FAA's most experienced compliance inspectors, he had conducted dozens of surprise reviews at airports nationwide. His job involved ensuring airline personnel followed federal regulations, maintained professional standards, and treated all passengers with equal respect regardless of race, ethnicity, or background. The irony never escaped him. As a black man in federal law enforcement, he regularly experienced the very discrimination he was professionally tasked with investigating and preventing. Now, 12 hours later at Gate C-24, his real work was beginning. The evening atmosphere at Denver International Airport pulsed with typical energy. Families corralled restless children while elderly couples shared airport snacks. Business travelers typed furiously on laptops while teenagers scrolled through social media. The constant background symphony included rolling luggage wheels, muffled announcements, and distant jet engines. Gate C-24 buzzed with anticipation for the 8:30 p.m. departure to Washington, D.C. The seating area held the usual mix of travelers, some reading paperbacks, others charging phones, a few attempting to nap despite the fluorescent lighting. Patricia Reynolds had claimed this territory as her domain for 8 long years. At 45, she had cultivated a reputation among colleagues for being challenging, particularly when dealing with passengers she deemed unworthy of first-class service. Her supervisors occasionally received informal complaints, but nothing had ever escalated to formal investigation. Her discriminatory pattern was methodical and calculated. With white passengers, especially those holding business or first-class tickets, Patricia transformed into the picture of helpful professionalism. Her smile appeared genuine, her voice warm, her assistance eager. But passengers of color faced an entirely different Patricia Reynolds. Excessive document scrutiny became routine. Additional security questions materialized from nowhere. General hostility replaced professional courtesy. She had perfected institutional racism that operated just below the threshold of formal complaints. Multiple security cameras positioned throughout the gate area recorded everything continuously. The footage is stored automatically for review during incidents or disputes. Dozens of passengers sat nearby with smartphones readily accessible, a generation instinctively prepared to document significant moments. United Airlines corporate offices occupied floors directly above the gate level. Airport management, customer service supervisors, and federal compliance liaisons worked within elevator distance. This proximity should have deterred misconduct, but Patricia had grown comfortable in her routine of unchecked bias. Federal aviation regulations couldn't have been clearer. Airline personnel were explicitly required to treat all passengers with identical respect and professionalism. Discrimination based on race, ethnicity, religion, or national origin constituted immediate grounds for termination and potential federal civil rights violations carrying substantial penalties. Tonight, those regulations faced their ultimate test. Patricia's years of unchecked discrimination were about to collide with federal oversight in ways she never imagined possible. As Jonathan approached her counter, passport and boarding pass in hand, he maintained his characteristic calm professionalism. His extensive training had prepared him for moments exactly like this. Jonathan's calm demeanor remained unshaken as he watched his passport disappear into the trash bin. The metallic clang of the document hitting the bottom echoed through the sudden silence that had fallen over the gate area. "Excuse me, that's my passport," he said evenly, his voice carrying the measured tone of someone accustomed to maintaining professionalism under pressure. "I need that document to board my flight." Patricia's lips curled into a satisfied smirk as she crossed her arms and leaned back in her ergonomic chair. The fluorescent light above cast harsh shadows across her face, emphasizing the contempt in her expression. "Oh, you need it!" she mocked, her voice rising to ensure nearby passengers could hear every word. "Well, maybe next time you should bring real documentation instead of whatever pathetic fake garbage you people try to pass off as legitimate." The smell of her overpowering perfume mixed with the antiseptic airport air as she stood and moved closer to the counter. Her name tag caught the light. Patricia Reynolds, Senior Gate Agent, as she used her height advantage to loom over Jonathan. "Ma'am, that's a valid United States passport issued by the Department of State," Jonathan replied, his tone remaining steady despite the escalating hostility. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor immediately." Patricia's laugh was sharp and theatrical, designed to humiliate. "My supervisor? You actually think my supervisor is going to take the side of some street thug trying to scam his way onto a plane with fake papers?" She gestured dramatically toward the waiting passengers, many of whom were now openly staring at the confrontation. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly the kind of security threat we're trained to identify. Suspicious individuals attempting to board aircraft with questionable documentation." Jonathan reached into his leather wallet and withdrew his driver's license, placing it carefully on the counter. "Here's additional identification. As you can see, the photographs match perfectly, the names are identical, and both documents are clearly legitimate government-issued identification." Patricia snatched the license and made an exaggerated performance of examining it. She held it up to the fluorescent light, squinted at it from multiple angles, and compared it to Jonathan's face with theatrical suspicion. "This could easily be fake too," she announced loudly. "These days, anyone with a computer can manufacture realistic-looking IDs. How do I know you didn't just steal some innocent person's identity?" The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others began reaching for their phones to document the increasingly bizarre interaction. "Because that's completely absurd," Jonathan responded, his professional training preventing any display of frustration. "I'm asking you to retrieve my passport from the trash and process my boarding pass according to standard airline procedures." "Standard procedures?" Patricia's voice dripped with sarcasm as she turned to her computer terminal. Let me just check your so-called confirmed reservation. She began typing with exaggerated dramatic flair, making concerned facial expressions and shaking her head disapprovingly at whatever she pretended to see on her screen. Oh, this is very interesting, she announced, loud enough for the entire gate area to hear. The system is showing multiple irregularities with your booking profile. Jonathan knew she was fabricating everything. He had checked in online that morning and received his mobile boarding pass without any issues. What specific irregularities are you referring to? Well, I'm not at liberty to discuss classified security details, Patricia replied smugly. But let's just say your booking pattern raises several red flags in our fraud detection system. Multiple payment methods, suspicious last-minute changes, questionable travel history. Does any of that ring a bell for you? None of it was remotely true, and Jonathan recognized the lies for exactly what they were: desperate attempts to justify discriminatory treatment with invented security concerns. A middle-aged white woman seated in the front row of the gate area had pulled out her iPhone and was openly recording the interaction. Her face showed clear disapproval of Patricia's behavior. A Hispanic family with 2 young children looked visibly uncomfortable, the parents whispering to each other in Spanish while trying to shield their kids from witnessing the discrimination. An elderly black couple in the back row exchanged knowing glances that spoke of decades of experiencing similar treatment. The woman nudged her husband and pointed toward her phone, indicating she too was documenting the incident. Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from my counter immediately, Patricia commanded, her voice taking on an authoritative tone designed to intimidate. You're becoming increasingly agitated, and I'm genuinely concerned about the safety of legitimate passengers. I'm not agitated in any way, Jonathan responded, his voice remaining perfectly level. I'm simply requesting the return of my legal documents and standard customer service that every passenger deserves. Standard customer service? Patricia scoffed, her contempt now completely unveiled. Standard customer service is reserved for legitimate passengers with proper documentation and appropriate behavior. What you're displaying is suspicious paperwork and an increasingly hostile attitude toward airline security personnel. She reached for the black phone on her desk with deliberate slowness, making sure every passenger could see her actions. I'm calling airport security right now. We have specific protocols for dealing with individuals who present fraudulent documents and become confrontational when their scams are exposed. Ma'am, I absolutely encourage you to call security, Jonathan said calmly. I also strongly encourage you to call your supervisor, and I recommend that you document exactly what you're reporting to them, because false accusations carry very serious legal consequences. Patricia paused mid-dial, something in Jonathan's measured tone causing a flicker of uncertainty to cross her face. But her pride and 8 years of unchallenged discriminatory behavior pushed her forward past any moment of doubt. Don't you dare threaten me, she snapped, her finger jabbing toward his face. You're in absolutely no position to make threats of any kind. In about 5 minutes, you're going to be explaining to federal agents why you attempted to board a commercial aircraft with fake identification documents. The recording passenger in the front row cleared her throat loudly. Excuse me. I've been watching this entire interaction from the beginning. This gentleman has been nothing but polite and professional, and you threw his passport in the trash for absolutely no legitimate reason. That's not normal procedure for anyone. Patricia whirled around to face the woman, her face flushing red with anger. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to mind your own business immediately. This is an active security investigation, and civilian interference is completely inappropriate and potentially illegal. I'm not interfering with anything, the woman replied firmly, continuing to record. I'm simply documenting what appears to be blatant racial discrimination happening in real time. Discrimination! Patricia's voice rose to near shouting volume. This has absolutely nothing to do with discrimination. This is about airport security and proper documentation verification procedures. If you continue to disrupt my official investigation, I'll have you removed from this gate area as well. More passengers began pulling out their phones to record. The Hispanic father started filming while positioning himself to shield his children from the escalating confrontation. The elderly black man nodded to his wife, who also began capturing video evidence. Jonathan stood perfectly still, his hands clearly visible at his sides, his posture completely non-threatening. Years of experience as a black man navigating institutional racism had taught him that any sudden movement, any raised voice, any display of frustration could be weaponized against him. "I'm going to ask one final time," he said quietly, his voice carrying quiet authority. "Please return my passport and process my boarding pass according to standard federal aviation regulations." Patricia's face contorted with rage. "And I'm going to tell you one final time. You are not boarding this aircraft. You are not getting your fake passport back. And in exactly 2 minutes, you're going to be explaining your pathetic little scam to federal security agents." Patricia grabbed her desk phone and dialed airport security with theatrical urgency, making sure every passenger could witness her performance. The plastic receiver pressed against her ear as she spoke loud enough for the entire gate to hear. "This is Patricia Reynolds at Gate C-24, she announced dramatically. "I need immediate assistance with a passenger presenting fraudulent documents and exhibiting increasingly aggressive behavior toward airline personnel." She paused, listening to the response while maintaining hostile eye contact with Jonathan. "Yes, he appears to be attempting to board with completely fake identification. No, he's absolutely refusing to leave the gate area voluntarily." The antiseptic smell of airport cleaning solution mixed with Patricia's overwhelming perfume as she continued her fabricated report. "Please send multiple officers immediately. I'm genuinely concerned about passenger safety at this point." Within 3 minutes, Officers Martinez and Thompson arrived at the gate, their heavy boots clicking against the polished floor. Their radios crackled with static as they assessed the scene. A calm black man standing professionally at the counter, a visibly agitated gate agent, and dozens of passengers with phones recording everything. Officer Martinez, a 15-year airport security veteran, immediately noticed the disconnect between Patricia's urgent report and the actual situation before him. "Ma'am, what exactly seems to be the problem here?" Martinez asked Patricia, his tone professionally neutral. Patricia launched into her fabricated account with renewed confidence, emboldened by the arrival of uniformed authority. "This individual presented completely fraudulent travel documents and became increasingly hostile and threatening when I questioned their authenticity according to proper security protocols." She gestured dramatically toward Jonathan. "He's been making veiled threats against airline personnel and disrupting normal gate operations. I believe he may be attempting some kind of elaborate scam or worse." "That's completely and demonstrably false," Jonathan interjected calmly, his voice carrying quiet authority. "I presented valid federal identification, which she immediately threw in the trash without examination, and I've remained completely professional throughout this entire interaction." Officer Thompson, younger and less experienced than his partner, immediately focused his attention on Jonathan with obvious suspicion. The fluorescent lighting reflected off his badge as he stepped closer. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification right away," Thompson demanded. "My identification is currently in that trash bin," Jonathan replied evenly, gesturing toward the wastebasket beside Patricia's desk. "She disposed of my valid United States passport and has refused to return it despite multiple polite requests." "He's absolutely lying!" Patricia shrieked, her voice echoing throughout the gate area. "I properly disposed of fraudulent documents according to established security protocols. This man is trying to manipulate the situation and play the victim." Martinez looked skeptical as he examined the trash bin. "Ma'am, standard procedure would be to confiscate and secure suspicious documents for investigation, not dispose of them entirely. Can you show me these allegedly fraudulent documents?" Patricia's confidence flickered momentarily. "Well, they were so obviously fake that I disposed of them according to proper protocol." "You threw away potential federal evidence?" Martinez asked, his tone becoming more professionally concerned and less supportive of Patricia's version of events. "Look, the important point here is that this individual clearly doesn't belong on this flight," Patricia said, her voice rising again as she gestured wildly. "I have 8 years of professional experience in aviation security. I absolutely know a suspicious individual when I see one." She turned to face the growing crowd of passengers, many now openly recording with their smartphones. "Everyone needs to step back immediately and stop filming. This is an active federal security investigation, and civilian interference is completely illegal." The middle-aged woman who had been recording from the beginning spoke up firmly. We have every legal right to document what's happening in a public space, especially when we're witnessing what appears to be obvious racial discrimination. Discrimination? Patricia's voice reached a near shriek that echoed off the terminal walls. This has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with race. This is purely about airport security protocols and proper documentation verification procedures. Officer Thompson, increasingly influenced by Patricia's dramatic assertions and apparent authority, stepped closer to Jonathan. His hand moved instinctively toward his handcuffs. "Sir, I'm going to need you to place your hands where I can clearly see them and step away from the counter area immediately," Thompson ordered. "Officer, I'm fully complying with all reasonable requests," Jonathan responded calmly, raising his hands slightly to shoulder level. "But I want to ensure you understand exactly what's actually happening here before taking any irreversible actions." "What's happening," Patricia interjected loudly, "is that this individual attempted to board a commercial aircraft using fraudulent federal documents, became increasingly belligerent when properly questioned about their authenticity, and is now trying to claim victim status to avoid federal prosecution." She pulled out her personal iPhone and began recording Jonathan directly. "I'm documenting this interaction for my own legal protection and for official airline security purposes. This individual has displayed aggressive and threatening behavior throughout this entire encounter." The harsh lighting reflected off her phone screen as she moved closer, deliberately invading Jonathan's personal space while filming. "Say something threatening now," she taunted quietly, her voice just loud enough for the phone's microphone to capture. "Go ahead, show everyone your true nature." Martinez watched Patricia's unprofessional behavior with growing alarm. In his extensive experience, legitimate security concerns didn't typically involve gate agents recording passengers on personal devices or making dramatic public declarations. "Ma'am, please stop recording and walk me through exactly what happened step by step," Martinez requested firmly. "I already explained everything clearly," Patricia snapped, whirling to face him. "Why aren't you arresting him immediately? Why are you questioning me instead of dealing with this obvious security threat? I'm the victim here." Officer Thompson had moved to a flanking position beside Jonathan, his hand now resting openly on his radio. "Sir, we're going to need to conduct a thorough search to ensure you're not carrying any weapons or contraband materials." "Officer, I'm not carrying any weapons of any kind," Jonathan replied steadily. "I'm a business traveler with completely standard personal items, but if you feel a search is absolutely necessary for everyone's safety, I'll fully comply." Patricia seized on this development like a predator sensing weakness. "Yes, search for him thoroughly. Check everything. I absolutely guarantee you'll find something suspicious. These people always have something illegal to hide." Several passengers audibly gasped at the openly discriminatory language. The woman recording called out loudly, "Did everyone hear that? These people, this is pure, undisguised racism." "It's not racism," Patricia screamed, completely losing any pretense of professionalism. "It's security. It's protecting innocent, legitimate passengers from dangerous individuals who clearly don't belong in civilized society." She grabbed her desk phone again with shaking hands. "I'm calling Denver police right now. Airport security obviously isn't taking this terrorist threat seriously enough. We need real law enforcement for this level of danger." Martinez held up his hand firmly. "Ma'am, please do not call additional agencies. We are handling this situation appropriately." "You're not handling anything," Patricia shouted, spit flying from her lips. "This man is clearly a major security risk, and you're letting him manipulate you with false claims of so-called discrimination." She began dialing anyway, her fingers stabbing at the numbers. "Denver Police Emergency Line. This is Patricia Reynolds at Denver International Airport, Gate C-24. I need immediate assistance with a potential terrorist threat situation." The crowd of passengers erupted in shocked murmurs and angry protests. Several people called out, "That's completely untrue, and we all saw what really happened." "Yes, an individual attempted to board a commercial aircraft with obviously fraudulent documents and has become increasingly aggressive and threatening," Patricia continued into the phone. "He appears to be Middle Eastern or—" She looked directly at Jonathan with undisguised hatred. "Well, he's definitely not American. Please send multiple patrol units immediately." The absurdity and racism of her false report hung in the air like toxic smoke. Jonathan maintained his calm exterior but internally recognized that the situation had escalated far beyond simple discrimination into potentially life-threatening territory. False terrorism accusations could result in federal charges, indefinite detention, and serious physical danger. Officer Martinez was now clearly uncomfortable with Patricia's increasingly unhinged behavior. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down immediately and stop making additional emergency calls. Let us handle this situation professionally." "I am handling this situation!" Patricia shrieked, her face red with rage. "I'm protecting this entire airport and all these innocent passengers from an obvious terrorist threat that you're too politically correct to recognize." She pointed dramatically at Jonathan with a trembling finger. "Look at him! Look at his suspicious, calm behavior, remaining collected in the face of legitimate security questioning. That's exactly what a professionally trained terrorist would do." Officer Thompson, fully manipulated by Patricia's hysteria, moved his hand directly to his handcuffs. "Sir, I'm going to need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back while we sort this entire situation out." Jonathan realized he could no longer allow the dangerous escalation to continue. The threat to his personal safety, the impact on innocent passengers, and the potential for serious federal charges based on Patricia's malicious false accusations meant it was time to reveal his true identity and federal authority. Jonathan slowly reached into his jacket pocket, ensuring every movement was deliberately visible to both security officers. The fluorescent terminal lighting caught the metallic gleam of his federal credentials as he withdrew them from his inner pocket. "Officers, before this situation escalates any further, I need to show you something extremely important," he announced clearly, his voice carrying new authority that cut through the chaos. He opened his leather credentials wallet, revealing both his official photograph and the unmistakable federal badge inside. The Gold Eagle seal caught the harsh airport lighting as he held it at eye level for both officers to examine. "I am Senior Safety Inspector Jonathan Hayes with the Federal Aviation Administration," he stated calmly, his professional demeanor now taking on unmistakable governmental authority. "I am currently conducting an unannounced federal compliance review of passenger processing procedures at this facility." Officer Martinez stepped closer to examine the credentials, his experienced eye immediately recognizing their authentic federal formatting, holographic security features, and official government seals. "Sir, these credentials appear completely legitimate," Martinez confirmed, his tone shifting to one of professional respect as he studied the identification thoroughly. Officer Thompson looked confused and uncertain, glancing rapidly between Jonathan's official federal identification and Patricia, whose face had suddenly drained of all color like water flowing from a broken dam. "That is absolutely correct," Jonathan continued, his voice now carrying the unmistakable tone of federal law enforcement authority. "For the past 25 minutes, I have been systematically documenting discriminatory behavior and multiple federal civil rights violations occurring at this gate." He reached into his leather briefcase and withdrew official FAA inspection paperwork bearing government letterhead and official seals. "This is my federal inspection authorization, personally signed by the regional administrator. I possess full federal authority to investigate compliance with anti-discrimination regulations in commercial aviation." The crisp sound of official documents being unfolded echoed through the suddenly silent gate area as passengers strained to understand the dramatic reversal unfolding before them. Patricia stared at the federal documents with her mouth opening and closing soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. The full magnitude of her catastrophic mistake was beginning to register in her consciousness. "Ma'am," Jonathan addressed Patricia directly, his voice now carrying the weight of federal authority, "you have just committed multiple serious federal violations in the presence of 2 sworn law enforcement officers and dozens of civilian witnesses." His calm professionalism remained intact, but there was steel beneath his words. "Your actions tonight constitute racial discrimination under federal civil rights law, filing false reports to law enforcement agencies, willful destruction of federal identification documents, and deliberate interference with an official federal inspection." He turned to Officer Martinez with clear expectation of immediate compliance. "Officer, I need you to immediately secure that trash bin containing my passport as federal evidence. I also require you to preserve all video footage from the gate area security camera system." Martinez nodded with instant professional deference. "Yes, sir. Absolutely, Inspector Hayes." He immediately moved toward the evidence preservation. "Ma'am," Martinez addressed Patricia with newfound authority. I need you to retrieve that passport from the trash bin immediately and handle it as federal evidence. Patricia's hands trembled violently as she reached into the wastebasket. Her earlier aggressive confidence completely evaporated like morning mist. I didn't realize. This has to be some kind of misunderstanding. No, ma'am, this is definitively not a misunderstanding of any kind, Jonathan replied with quiet but unmistakable firmness. This represents a clear pattern of discriminatory behavior that I have been specifically investigating across multiple airport facilities nationwide. He produced a small digital recording device from his pocket. I have also been recording this entire interaction as part of my official federal investigation. Your explicit statements about these people and your completely fabricated terrorism accusations are all permanently documented as federal evidence. The crowd of passengers erupted in murmurs of amazement, satisfaction, and vindication. The woman who had been recording from the beginning called out triumphantly, I knew something was seriously wrong. Thank you for exposing this racism. Patricia attempted desperately to salvage her rapidly deteriorating situation. Inspector Hayes, I was simply following established security protocols. I genuinely thought your documents appeared suspicious because I am black? Jonathan interrupted with laser precision. Because in your extensive experience, black men don't belong in first-class cabins or on flights to Washington, D.C.? He gestured toward the dozens of recording passengers surrounding them. Ma'am, we now have extensive witness testimony documenting your differential treatment patterns. They observed you examine my documents for approximately 30 seconds before declaring them fraudulent. They heard you repeatedly refer to these people and make completely false terrorism accusations. They watched you deliberately destroy valid federal identification documents. Airport Supervisor Margaret Carter appeared at the gate with visible urgency, having been immediately alerted by the emergency radio traffic and reports of federal law enforcement involvement. What exactly is happening here? She asked breathlessly. I received multiple reports of a serious security incident involving federal authorities. Officer Martinez stepped forward with obvious respect. Ma'am, this is Inspector Jonathan Hayes with the Federal Aviation Administration. He's conducting an official federal investigation, and there appear to be very serious policy violations by your gate agent. Supervisor Carter's face turned completely white as she examined Jonathan's credentials with growing horror. Inspector Hayes, I am absolutely mortified. This behavior is completely unacceptable and violates every policy we have. Miss Carter, I require Miss Reynolds to be immediately removed from her position, Jonathan stated with federal authority. She has violated numerous federal regulations and potentially committed multiple criminal acts. I will be filing comprehensive formal reports with both the FAA Enforcement Division and the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. The complete reversal of power was now unmistakable to everyone present. The federal inspector Patricia had tried to humiliate and remove was now in absolute control, conducting an official investigation that would have far-reaching consequences for her career, the airline's operations, and the entire aviation industry's approach to civil rights enforcement. Within minutes of Jonathan's identity revelation, Gate C-24 transformed into a corporate crisis management center. United Airlines executives materialized as if summoned by emergency protocols, their faces displaying the particular strain of realizing their company faced a federal discrimination investigation that would soon explode across social media. The smell of rushed coffee and nervous perspiration mixed with the antiseptic airport air as senior management huddled in urgent whispered conferences. Inspector Hayes, Station Manager David Walsh approached with visible anxiety, his company tie askew from hurried movement. We are implementing immediate corrective actions. Miss Reynolds has been suspended without pay pending a comprehensive investigation into her conduct. 2 additional security officers flanked Patricia as her company badge, access keys, and airport credentials were systematically confiscated. Her face had transformed from earlier smugness to complete devastation as reality crystallized. 8 years of employment, pension benefits, health care coverage, all potentially destroyed by 25 minutes of discriminatory behavior she assumed would go unchallenged. This is my entire livelihood, Patricia pleaded desperately to Supervisor Carter, her voice cracking with panic. I have mortgage payments, car loans, and credit card debt. I made a terrible mistake, but surely everyone deserves a second chance. Ma'am, You did not make a mistake of any kind, Jonathan interjected with calm federal authority. You made a deliberate series of discriminatory choices to intimidate, humiliate, and file false reports against a passenger based solely on his race. These were not errors in judgment. They constitute violations of federal law. United Airlines legal counsel Sandra Morrison had arrived breathlessly, rapidly taking notes while speaking in hushed, urgent tones with executives. The company's liability exposure was mounting exponentially, particularly with multiple passenger videos already being uploaded to social media platforms with hashtags trending toward viral status. The clicking of high heels against polished floors echoed as Morrison approached cautiously. Inspector Hayes, United Airlines commits to complete cooperation with your federal investigation. We're prepared to implement immediate remedial measures and provide unrestricted access to personnel records and training documentation. Jonathan nodded with professional acknowledgement. That cooperation is appreciated, but understand clearly that this investigation extends far beyond tonight's isolated incident. I will be conducting a comprehensive review of Miss Reynolds' complete employment history, all passenger complaint records, and your company's documented responses to previous discrimination reports. Officer Martinez had carefully secured Jonathan's passport in an official evidence bag, the government seal reflecting under fluorescent lighting. Sir, we'll need this process through our evidence system for your federal report documentation. Officer, I have backup federal identification sufficient for travel purposes, Jonathan replied, displaying his credentials again. However, that passport now contains Miss Reynolds' fingerprints and represents deliberate destruction of federal documents. The FBI Civil Rights Division will require that physical evidence. The crowd of passengers had grown substantially as word spread through the terminal's social networks. Many were posting real-time updates with hashtags like #AirportDiscrimination and #FAAI-Inspector, their phone screens glowing as the story gained momentum across platforms. Local news stations had been alerted by social media activity and were dispatching crews to the airport, recognizing a developing story with significant public interest potential. Patricia's hastily summoned attorney arrived looking professionally grim after being briefed on the deteriorating situation via frantic phone calls during his rush to the airport. Miss Reynolds, you must understand the extreme seriousness of your legal situation, the attorney explained bluntly, his briefcase clicking open as he withdrew legal documents. Federal civil rights violations carry substantial penalties, including potential incarceration. Prison time? Patricia's voice cracked completely. For performing my assigned job duties? Your job responsibilities do not include disposing of passengers' federal documents or fabricating terrorism accusations, the attorney replied with brutal honesty. We need to discuss immediate damage control strategies. Jonathan addressed the gathered passengers who had witnessed and documented the discrimination. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to personally thank each of you for documenting tonight's events with your recordings. Your video evidence and witness testimony will prove crucial in ensuring full accountability. The Hispanic father who had defended Jonathan earlier stepped forward with his family. Inspector, we travel frequently for business, and we've experienced similar discriminatory treatment multiple times. Is there an official process for reporting previous incidents? Absolutely, Jonathan confirmed, retrieving official FAA complaint forms from his briefcase. All reports of discrimination in commercial aviation are investigated thoroughly. Your experiences matter significantly, and proper documentation helps federal investigators identify systematic patterns. Supervisor Carter approached with her laptop open, scrolling through personnel files with growing concern. Inspector Hayes, I'm reviewing Miss Reynolds' complete employment record. There are 3 separate informal complaints documenting discriminatory treatment in the past 18 months, but none triggered formal investigation procedures. That represents exactly the kind of systematic institutional failure I'm here to document and correct, Jonathan replied. Informal complaints regarding discrimination should automatically trigger immediate investigation and mandatory retraining, not be filed away and systematically ignored. Denver Police Detective Rodriguez had arrived to interview witnesses regarding Patricia's false terrorism report, a criminal offense completely separate from federal civil rights violations. Within 48 hours, video footage from Gate C-24 had exploded across every major social media platform, accumulating over 15 million views and generating hundreds of thousands of shares. The hashtag #PatriciaGate agent dominated trending topics nationally as news outlets recognized the story's explosive potential. The acrid smell of printer ink filled newsrooms as journalists worked around the clock, their keyboards clicking rapidly as they investigated the broader implications of institutionalized discrimination in air travel. The Department of Transportation's Office of Inspector General launched an immediate comprehensive investigation, dispatching a full team of federal investigators to Denver International Airport. Inspector General Michelle Rodriguez announced at a packed press conference, her voice echoing through the briefing room, "This incident represents not merely individual misconduct, but potentially systematic failures in civil rights enforcement throughout the commercial aviation industry." Jonathan found himself thrust into an unwanted media spotlight he never sought. Interview requests flooded in from major networks, congressional offices, and civil rights organizations seeking his perspective on discrimination patterns in air travel. Despite the attention, he remained laser-focused on the systematic investigation that would create lasting institutional change. "This case transcends one discriminatory gate agent," Jonathan explained during his CNN interview with Anderson Cooper, the studio lights reflecting off his federal badge. "This exposes a pervasive culture within the travel industry where discrimination against passengers of color has become normalized, systematized, and institutionally protected." The FBI's Civil Rights Division opened a parallel criminal investigation into Patricia Reynolds for federal civil rights violations under Title VI. Special Agent Lisa Park explained to assembled reporters, her voice carrying the weight of federal authority, "When airline employees exploit their positions of authority to discriminate based on race, they violate not just corporate policies, but fundamental federal law." Patricia's legal situation deteriorated with stunning rapidity. Her criminal defense attorney filed desperate motions requesting judicial leniency, but the evidence mountain was insurmountable. Multiple passenger videos documented her discriminatory statements and actions. Jonathan's official recording captured every detail, and airport security footage provided additional corroborating documentation. "Your Honor," federal prosecutor James Mitchell argued during Patricia's arraignment, his voice filling the courtroom, "the defendant didn't simply discriminate. She systematically weaponized federal security protocols to target a passenger based exclusively on racial characteristics. She filed demonstrably false terrorism reports and deliberately destroyed federal identification documents. This represents a serious, calculated abuse of public trust." Patricia's defense attorney attempted arguing that she was following established training protocols, but United Airlines immediately and publicly distanced themselves from this defense strategy. Corporate executives testified under oath that Patricia's actions violated every aspect of their official anti-discrimination policies and federal compliance requirements. The aviation industry's response was swift and comprehensive. United Airlines faced a devastating $2.3 million fine from the FAA for civil rights violations and inadequate discrimination prevention measures. CEO Scott Kirby issued a public apology that was broadcast during prime time, announcing a complete overhaul of customer service training protocols. "There exists no excuse whatsoever for what happened to Inspector Hayes," Kirby stated, his words carrying across national airwaves. "We are implementing absolute zero-tolerance policies for discrimination and mandatory unconscious bias training for every single customer-facing employee." Other major airlines, recognizing their own vulnerability to similar scrutiny, proactively began comprehensive policy reviews. Delta, American, and Southwest all announced enhanced anti-discrimination training programs and new federal oversight measures for customer service personnel within days of the incident. Congressional hearings were immediately scheduled by the House Transportation Committee. Committee Chair Peter DeFazio called Jonathan to provide expert testimony about systematic discrimination patterns in aviation, the hearing room packed with media and civil rights advocates. "Inspector Hayes, your documented experience unfortunately represents thousands of similar incidents that occur daily but go unrecorded and unpunished throughout our transportation system," DeFazio stated, his words echoing through the marble-walled chamber. During his congressional testimony, Jonathan presented comprehensive statistical data on discrimination complaints across the aviation industry, his charts and graphs projected on large screens for maximum impact. Mr. Chairman, our extensive federal investigation has identified disturbing patterns of differential treatment at airports nationwide, Jonathan testified. African American passengers are 150% more likely to be subjected to additional security screening, 200% more likely to have their documents questioned without cause, and 300% more likely to be removed from flights compared to white passengers with identical credentials. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People announced a comprehensive investigation into systematic airline discrimination, with Jonathan serving as a key federal consultant. NAACP President Derek Johnson stated at a packed press conference, "Inspector Hayes' documented experience demonstrates that discrimination in air travel affects everyone from federal law enforcement officers to ordinary American families." Patricia's trial became a landmark federal case in civil rights enforcement. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of discriminatory intent, including testimony from multiple previous passengers who had experienced identical treatment from Patricia over several years. She consistently referred to passengers of color as "these people," testified Maria Gonzalez, a Latina passenger who had been subjected to Patricia's discrimination 8 months earlier. "She made me feel like I didn't belong in America, much less in an airport." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before finding Patricia guilty on multiple federal charges: civil rights violations under federal law, filing false police reports, and willful destruction of federal identification documents. Judge Sarah Williams sentenced Patricia to 18 months in federal prison and 3 years of supervised probation, her gavel echoing through the packed courtroom. "Miss Reynolds," Judge Williams stated during sentencing, her words recorded for legal precedent, "your actions represented not merely personal bias, but a calculated abuse of governmental authority that fundamentally undermined public trust in our aviation security system. Federal employees and contractors bear heightened responsibility to uphold civil rights, and your violations were particularly egregious and systematic." Patricia's aviation career ended permanently. The Federal Aviation Administration placed her on a lifetime exclusion list, preventing employment in any capacity at airports nationwide. Her professional certifications were permanently revoked, and she faced ongoing civil litigation from passengers she had previously discriminated against. The systematic changes extended far beyond Patricia's individual punishment. The FAA implemented comprehensive new mandatory reporting requirements for discrimination incidents. Airlines were required to maintain detailed records of all passenger complaints and demonstrate proactive measures to prevent discriminatory bias. Training programs were revolutionized industry-wide. All customer service personnel were required to complete extensive bias recognition and prevention courses, with annual recertification requirements and federal oversight of curriculum content. Federal oversight increased dramatically. The number of unannounced compliance inspections like Jonathan's was tripled, with inspectors receiving specialized training to identify discrimination patterns and systematic civil rights violations. The legal precedent established by Patricia's federal conviction empowered other victims of airline discrimination to come forward with their experiences. Class action lawsuits were filed against multiple airlines, resulting in tens of millions of dollars in settlements and even more comprehensive policy changes across the industry. 3 months after the Gate C-24 incident, Jonathan received the Attorney General's Award for Excellence in Civil Rights Enforcement during a ceremony at the Department of Justice, attended by federal officials and civil rights leaders. 6 months after that evening at Gate C-24, Jonathan Hayes stood before the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., delivering a keynote on civil rights enforcement. The audience included federal officials and advocates who had followed his case since the viral video first exploded across social media. The scent of fresh coffee mixed with expectant silence as hundreds leaned forward. "When I approached Patricia Reynolds' counter that night," Jonathan reflected, "I was conducting a routine compliance inspection. I never imagined becoming the subject of the very discrimination I was investigating." He paused, scanning engaged faces. "That experience taught me something crucial about bias in America. Discrimination doesn't pause when you show credentials. It doesn't stop when you prove your qualifications. It affects people of color regardless of education, position, or authority." Changes since his case had been substantial and measurable. Airlines reported 65% fewer discrimination complaints. Passenger surveys showed increased confidence among travelers of color receiving fair treatment. The most significant outcome wasn't Patricia Reynolds serving prison time, Jonathan continued. It was thousands of airport personnel receiving enhanced bias training, new reporting systems making it easier to document discrimination. Federal oversight ensures accountability. United Airlines had become an industry model for civil rights compliance. Their training program was adopted by competitors, and satisfaction scores among diverse travelers improved dramatically. But we cannot mistake progress for completion, Jonathan warned. Discrimination is adaptive. When we close one avenue, it finds another. When we address overt bias, it becomes subtle. Our vigilance must be constant. Several passengers who had recorded the original incident nodded in recognition. Their videos had become crucial evidence in Patricia's prosecution and the broader investigation that followed. To everyone who pulled out phones that night, thank you, Jonathan said directly to them. You demonstrated that in the digital age, discrimination cannot hide in plain sight. Your courage made accountability possible. Carlos Rivera, the Hispanic father who defended Jonathan, later told reporters, I teach my children that when you see something wrong, speak up. That night showed them standing up for others makes a real difference. Patricia Reynolds, serving her federal sentence, had become a cautionary tale throughout aviation. Her story was used in training sessions as an example of how unchecked bias destroys lives, both victims and perpetrators. Patricia Reynolds wasn't a monster, Jonathan emphasized. She was someone who allowed unchecked bias to guide professional decisions. Her story warns us about normalizing discrimination. Media attention had been intense but productive. Jonathan used his platform advocating for stronger civil rights enforcement across federal agencies. His recommendations were incorporated into new Transportation Department regulations. Change is possible, Jonathan concluded, but requires personal responsibility. When you witness discrimination, document it. When you see injustice, speak up. When you have power to create change, use it. He looked directly into cameras broadcasting nationwide. If this story opened your eyes to daily discrimination, share it with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe to civil rights organizations. Support businesses demonstrating genuine equality commitment. Your voice, your phone, your willingness to stand up, these are powerful justice tools. Jonathan posed his final challenge. Next time you witness someone treated unfairly because of race, religion, or background, ask yourself, what will you do? Will you look away or remember Gate C-24 and choose to act? The applause was sustained and heartfelt. Individual courage, combined with systematic accountability, could create change protecting everyone's civil rights. Because discrimination thrives in silence but dies in the light of truth and accountability, discrimination complaints in aviation decreased 40% nationwide. Federal oversight tripled with specialized civil rights inspectors. Training requirements became mandatory across all major airlines. Patricia's conviction established legal precedent, empowering other victims to seek justice. Most importantly, thousands of travelers now felt safer knowing their rights were protected, and documented discrimination would face serious consequences. The Gate C-24 incident proved that when good people refuse to stay silent, justice prevails over injustice every single time. Have you ever witnessed discrimination like this? What did you do? Share this story and tell us what you would do if you saw someone treated like Jonathan. Hit subscribe for more stories about justice prevailing over injustice. Remember, your voice matters. Use it.